Another week is down. This time, week 7 has concluded. We've got the week 7 recap. Season going by very quickly, right? We are nearing mid-season. 2 weeks from tonight, we will have the mid-season recap. Pretty amazing to think about. And I know Andrew out there, he really gets upset when he's forced to think about the swift passage of time that we're all experiencing. Of course, the swift passage of time that inevitably leads to our release into the cold, dark abyss that is death. But back to fantasy football now, the week 7 headline, because I want to get right into that, because we're going to hope to be a little bit quicker here tonight now that nobody will be on. The run of 3 straight people on ends on this evening. So would like to be a little bit more efficient. The week 7 headline is the excellence that we're seeing from 2 teammates and 2 highly drafted teammates this season. And that, I think it's pretty obvious that it's Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. And they are currently the number 1 scoring player and number 3 out of all fantasy football players in half PPR scoring. Lamar Jackson is 1. Derrick Henry is 3. And Derrick Henry, by the way, has 29 more points than any other running back, wide receiver, or tight end. He's been dominant. He, to me, is the clear fantasy MVP right now. But Lamar Jackson, too. I mean, let's give him his props. 37.25. He has scored over 35 in 2 of the last 3 weeks. He's been pretty amazing. He was the weekly MVP in week 7 for Nothdurft. And between those 2 players, they have 3 of the 7 weekly MVP awards right now. They've been huge. There's a reason that they are on the teams with the 2 best records in the league, too. Nothdurft in first, Peter in second. Those 2 guys have been great. The Ravens have been on a roll since their 0-2 start. And it's a fun time to own either of those 2 guys. So, yeah, that to me is the headline here, is mainly because I've talked so much about how I don't love rostering teammates, especially when you have to draft them highly. But this is right here, this shows you that it can work. Now, it has taken 2 guys being utterly dominant for it to work, but I mean, imagine if a team in our league had both of those players. You realistically could have taken them in the 2nd and 3rd rounds. And I mean, you'd be wiping the floor with people right now if you had both of those guys. So it is possible for a quarterback running back tandem to work out, but things need to go very well for that to be the case. It needs to be a very strong offense. Right now, the Ravens are. So we'll move into the matchups, and I think we got to start with, we had some close matchups this week, but I think we have to start with the highest scoring performance of the season thus far, and that's Peter, 150.96, defeating Dylan, 99.76 for Peter. The matchup MVP, you could give it to a few different guys. I think we're going to give it to Tank Bigsby, 23.8 points, getting the opportunity to be the lead guy for Jacksonville and just killing it, right? So Bigsby was fantastic. You're hoping that ETN, misses more time. I don't think that's going to be the case. I haven't really dug too deeply into it, but I know that was not believed to be a super significant injury, but maybe he misses another week. nonetheless, Tank Bigsby, if nothing else, has certainly forced his himself into a timeshare, and he's just had a great season. He really has. All the hype he had last year, he's delivering it on it. He's delivering on it this season, averaging over 6 yards per carry. Derrick Henry, already mentioned him, running back one, highest scoring non-quarterback, and he has been a bear. 16.1 or more each of his last 6 games. He finds a way to score every single week. He has scored a touchdown every week, and he has 10 total on the season. Just conventional wisdom tells you that that's going to come down a little bit, but who knows? It might not. There's no there are a few better power running backs in the history of this sport, and having Lamar Jackson opens things up so much for you. That offense is going strong. They've got some favorable matchups upcoming with Cleveland, Denver, Cincinnati, and those are respectable defenses, but they're favorable in the sense that Baltimore should be playing from ahead and should be able to run the football, at least against Cleveland and Denver. So it might just keep on going. And the other thing, too, he's had these huge rushing performances. That was the thing that I didn't count on this year. Touchdowns I thought would be there, but these, when you start looking at it, it's unbelievable. The man has had 132 or more rushing yards in 4 of his last 5 games. That's just insanity. 873 yards on the ground through 7 weeks. I mean, he's on pace. He's got to be on pace for a 2,000-yard rushing season, right? Let's do the old math on that. Let's break out the old calculator. What the hell just happened? He's on pace for 2,120 yards rushing. That's sick. And to go with that, 20-something touchdowns. Henry's been unbelievable. Certainly would be the top overall pick if we redrafted right now. Justin Jefferson just keeps on. He's putting up the same line every game. It's real impressive, right? He ends up with about 80 to 90 receiving yards, a touchdown, somewhere between 5 to 7 receptions, just as consistent as they come. And both of those early picks Peter made have worked out as well as you could have asked for. Running back 1, wide receiver 4. And Jefferson is the wide receiver 4 in spite of the fact that he's already had his bye. DK Metcalf had a good game, and this is DK, right? Sometimes great, sometimes shitty. He was great. I think he had a long touchdown in this one. Certainly had a long reception. And he ended up 4 for 99 and 1. He did get banged up, and it seems like maybe he misses this week, but he at least avoided a long-term injury. Baker Mayfield, let's talk about him because mentioned Jackson is the top scoring player. Henry is the 3rd highest scorer. Guess who's 2nd? Baker Mayfield. Incredible. He's turned into an absolute gunslinger. He's got 18 touchdowns already. That's passing. He's got 20 total. 20 total touchdowns. Pretty amazing stuff. He's looked really good. I do worry about him now with Godwin gone for the season and Evans gone for a month. I really do worry about Mayfield. But he's playing well. Maybe he can make it work. And if nothing else, he's already given Peter more than you really ever could have bargained for. 29 plus points 3 of the last 4 weeks. And that was right around when Peter added him. I think he picked him up prior to week 4. He's had him during this fantastic stretch. So we'll see what comes of that situation. And then Bucky Irving looked good again. He got into the end zone. Inefficient day on the ground, but he made up for it with 54 yards receiving and that touchdown. I do worry a little bit about him as well, just because it seems you would think that Buccaneers offense is going to take a step back now, and that hurts Irving, and it might make it where Rachaad White, who is the superior pass catcher, he might be out there more now because you need somebody to catch passes here. You're losing two of the best receivers in the game. So you need some sure-handed guys out there. Rachaad White, while he's an inefficient ball carrier, he really has that pass-catching skill set. So I think it's possible we see more White than Irving over the next few weeks. Irving will probably have to make do down along the goal line, which he's done a nice job with that recently. Touchdowns in 3 of the last 4 games. Dalton Kincaid just kind of keeps being the same thing. He's got no ceiling. He has a respectable floor for the tight end position, and that's why he comes out as the tight end 12 so far on the year. Certainly a disappointment for what many, myself included, expected. You hope the touchdowns come. That's what's hurt him and some other tight ends so far this year. He only has 1. The targets are there, right? 5+ targets each of the last handful of games. You just need touchdowns to come, and maybe they will with that Bills offense improving, that passing offense improving, I should specify. And we got to carry right into on the bench. Amari Cooper looked good in his Bills debut. He ends up going 4 for 66 and 1. Only 5 targets, but hey, he just got there. It was a blowout. They didn't need to throw it a crazy amount. And Cooper still produced his second best game of the season. So if you're Peter, you got to be thrilled with the idea that Cooper, who looked horrific in Cleveland, could now deliver on that low-end wide receiver 2 kind of stock that you drafted him as, and maybe he has upside to be even better than that. And hey, Jalen Hurts, he was good too for fantasy purposes. He ended up with the 2 rushing touchdowns along the goal line. Threw for 114 yards, attempted 14 passes in the blowout win over the Giants. But big thing with Hurts, you need that rushing production. I don't love that he's only had over 33 yards rushing in 1 game this year, but at least he has the 4 rushing scores. You need that to keep up for Hurts to be what we know he's capable of being for fantasy. But yeah, all in all, I mean, this was just an amazing week, topping 150. And Peter's team's in a good spot now. Second best record, 3rd in points, and some guys that are trending upwards when you look at Cooper and Bigsby, and you have that just dynamic duo of Henry and Jefferson. On the losing end is Dylan. And before we start analyzing Dylan's squad, Dylan did prepare a poem, if you want to call it that, dedicated to Saquon Barkley. Dylan wrote this on Sunday and requested that this be read. And so I'm going to do that for him reluctantly. I am going to read this for Dylan. It's titled Ode to Barkley the Retard. Barkley, oh Barkley, your return is today. Barkley, oh Barkley, you are so gay. Barkley, oh Barkley, you are so greedy. Barkley, oh Barkley, you like to party with Diddy. Barkley, oh Barkley, you have no grit. Barkley, oh Barkley, you only like your GF for her tit. Barkley, oh Barkley, I hope you get airlifted. Barkley, oh Barkley, you basically forfeited. Barkley, oh Barkley, you have acne like a teen. Barkley, oh Barkley, I hope you rupture your spleen. Barkley, oh Barkley, I've never hated you more. Barkley, oh Barkley, your mother's a whore. Barkley, oh Barkley, you will win today. Barkley, oh Barkley, I hope you end up like JFK. Barkley, oh Barkley, I understand you needed a restart. Barkley, oh Barkley, in the end, you are a huge retard. So that is Dylan's ode to the former franchise player of the New York Giants turned enemy with the Philadelphia Eagles and a player that Dylan traded for in advance of this week. Swung one of the bigger trades in league history. And I would venture to guess the biggest move that Dylan has ever made in our league's history. 8-player deal, Barkley, Waddle, and Tank Dell coming from Horvath, and Dylan in return sending Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, DJ Moore, Jake Ferguson, and Trey Sermon. Massive deal. One that I didn't love for Horvath in the short term because we'll talk more about Horvath's team, but he kind of needed to win, and he's bringing on a bunch of guys who are on bye. I felt like he was pretty much guaranteeing himself an 0-2 week, and that is what ended up happening. Even if it was by a small margin, his team put up 90 points. So he put himself in that position. And as for Dylan, I don't know if I love it. Barkley and Taylor, when healthy, certainly Barkley is the better asset, but is it such a difference that it was worth essentially giving up Swift and Ferguson? Because to me, DJ Moore is pretty equal to the two receivers he got. I don't like Tank Dell's long-term outlook. Once Nico Collins comes back, I don't really want anything to do with Dell. And as far as Waddle goes, yeah, it should be better now with Tagovailoa back. But it's not like Waddle was setting the world ablaze last season, right? It was the Tyreek Hill show. And Raheem Mostert scoring 20 touchdowns and Devon Achane making all these big plays. So I don't know. To me, you got a little bit better at running back one going from Taylor to Barkley. Maybe you got a little bit better at one of the wide receiver spots going from Moore to Waddle / Dell. You gained yourself a little bit of wide receiver depth, but at the expense of your running back two and your tight end. Dylan he'll be counting on Nick Chubb now. And it's certainly possible that Chubb, the freak of nature that he is, will deliver, but I don't know. It's a risk, and Dylan's running back depth is now gutted. So anyway, Barkley, the man of the hour, absolutely delivered in his team debut for Dylan, 25.7 points, and it could have been more. Because as mentioned, Hurts came away with 2 goal line touchdowns. Let's say even one of those goes to Barkley, he would have had a 30-plus point performance for the third time in 6 games. He's been fantastic. Next to Derrick Henry, probably the best running back to own. It's Henry, Kyron Williams, Barkley, kind of those 3 guys as the most elite options. So Barkley's been fantastic. But and the other crazy thing about this week for Dylan, he gets over 35 points out of the defense and kicker spots. So if you had told Dylan coming into the week, you're going to get over 60 points between Barkley, DST, and kicker, I mean, he probably would have thought, damn, I had a pretty big week, didn't I? Well, you didn't, because no one else really did much. Hunter Henry, to his credit, had a nice game. And that could be big for Dylan. I do want to mention that because talking about the trade of Ferguson, it is possible that Drake May could make Hunter Henry a good option here. Henry up to the tight end 7 on the season. He's scored in double digits each of the 2 games that May has started. So maybe that will pan out. That would be huge for Dylan as far as that trade goes. So he performed well too. It's just the fact that you didn't get double digits out of anybody else. Chubb got into the end zone, but that's about all he did in his return, 32 yards on 12 touches. You knew that there would be rust there. And he scored a 1 yard touchdown. But man, just some brutality elsewhere. Davante Adams in his reunion with Rodgers, not great. Not great at all. 3 catches on 9 targets, just 30 yards. The best play Davante Adams made on the night was a tackle of Beanie Bishop, preventing him from a pick six. A pick six that, by the way, would have allowed Lohan to defeat me. So thank you, Davante Adams, for saving me from that big defeat. But this isn't about me. This is about Dylan, and it's about Davante and Aaron. And it was terrible. Yeah, high expectations. They didn't look great. See what happens in the coming weeks. Wan'Dale Robinson is just a depressing situation. 67 targets on the season, which I believe is either first or second in the NFL. And yet he's just not, he's nothing more than a low end flex. He's got a real high floor because of all those targets, but there's zero ceiling. And I mean, the fact he's averaging 7 yards per reception this year is just disgusting. That's the way they use him. He's their around the line of scrimmage guy. He's been in that role seemingly since he entered the NFL. I think he's a good player, but this is just the way they choose to use him. And, you're limited at the quarterback position, which of course then limits what you can do with your receivers. But I mean, in this one, 6 catches for 23 yards is just a disgrace. Disgrace. Under 4 yards a catch. It's not really a guy I'd ever want to start because what's the upside? Like, yeah, if you had a real good starting team around him and you just need it, if you just felt like, hey, I just want, give me 7, 8 points out of my flex, I'll be happy, then sure. But not when you're looking to get production out of the spot, legitimate production and upside. And then, man, the real just horrendous aspect of this team was that newly acquired Stroud Tank Dell stack. They combined for 6.2 points. Tank Dell, 0. Didn't bring in any of his 4 targets. And I mean, you're doing that on a day where Nico Collins isn't around. That does not bode well. I think Tank Dell's a good player too. I don't know what the deal is there. He's coming off some significant shit. Dylan mentioned it when he was on. You're coming off a big injury. You're coming off a real bad situation in the offseason as well. Maybe some of that stuff's playing into it, but for him to be the wide receiver 69 on the season is crazy. I don't know. You got a great matchup this week. You got the big Colts secondary. You got a chance to do some damage there, but this was an ugly one. Stroud, probably the worst game. Not probably. This was the worst game of his NFL career. 10 of 21, 86 yards. And Green Bay has a good defense. Let's give them credit. But my God, I mean, that is alarming. And now you look at this the last 2 weeks without Collins. You're talking about under 300 total passing yards each of the last 2 weeks on 52 passing attempts. So he's missing Collins greatly. Again, just like I said with Dell, Stroud has that same cake matchup against the Colts secondary. So maybe you get it going here, but I don't know. Stroud, the quarterback 11, he was drafted in the 5th round. He quietly has been one of the worst picks of the draft as far as guys who have played, like who aren't injured. Stroud, one of the worst healthy draft picks of the season, and this was his bottoming out. And when you look at it, he really is the reason that Dylan couldn't at least come away with a second matchup win here. I mean, he needed 9-10 more points to get a second matchup win. You got to blame Stroud for limiting himself and Dell. Some good stuff on the bench. Romeo Doubs had another good game. You know, he had that little piss fit and was suspended a game. And since then, he's come back and he's looked really good. 2 touchdowns in week 6. This past game, 10 targets, almost 100 yards receiving. So I guess that the moral of that story is if you cry, you'll get your way. But Romeo Doubs is pretty solid, and him and Jordan Love have a nice connection. He's a guy I'd much rather start him than Wan'Dale Robinson, just because with Doubs at least you have some chance at upside, and Dylan will have Jalen Waddle now as well. He'll have him as an option with Tagovailoa likely back. Ray Davis got into the end zone again. And yeah, I mean, Dylan, this was not great. He's 6-8, but he's got a decent team, and especially if Puka Nacua can come back. He was designated to return today. If you could get him back, and if you could get maybe Adams rolling, this team's definitely very much in playoff contention, but right now trending downwards. All right, we'll move along now to we had 3 very close matchups, and we're going to start with Colin defeating Nothdurft, 122.55 to 108.57. It's amazing that Nothdurft was even able to get it to this point, considering where he was at coming into Monday night. But we'll start with Klingman and his matchup MVP, Breece Hall, 23.1 points. The sky was falling on Breece Hall, and he has delivered the last 2 weeks with over 40 fantasy points combined. Pretty amazing stuff out of him on Sunday night. Easily was the best player on the Jets offense. They kind of got away from him. I don't know why. He was dominating early on, and they kind of got away from him, and it was strange. And I mean, I get it. Like at a point, they fell behind. It's not like you were going to run the ball, but he was their best receiver on Sunday night. 6 catches for 103 yards. He was just so explosive in space. And yeah, they got away from him. But he's looked really good the last 2 weeks. And I think if you're Colin, you're starting to feel pretty good about him delivering on where he was drafted. Maybe he doesn't fully live up to being a top 5 overall pick, but this is easily a guy who would go in the 1st round in a redraft today. And a guy that the Jets, they got to lean on him if they're going to get back into the race. It's not going to be with Rodgers. It's going to be with Breece Hall. So he was great. Ken Walker, he's playing the best football of his career right now, averaging 20 fantasy points per game. And he's the running back 8 on the season despite missing 2 games. Crazy touchdown output right now. He's got 7 through 5 contests played. The rushing efficiency isn't off the charts, but he's averaging 4.7 per carry. And to me, the big thing, what has taken him to another level this year is pass catching. Ken Walker was never known for that. Um, I'll pull up his exact stats, but that was not a big thing for him. And here we are, again, through just 5 games played, and Walker has 23 receptions. So almost 5 catches per game. That's a huge deal. That's how you take yourself from being good in fantasy, like he's always been. He's always been like a good running back, too. That's how you become great, is when you start incorporating that passing work. And I mean, this is wild to look at. First 2 seasons for Walker, 27 receptions, then 29. And like I said, he's already at 23 this year. He's going to blow by. I mean, he might set a career high in receptions this week. He has an outside chance of it. He's been fantastic. One of the best picks of the draft. You know, he had kind of slipped down a little bit because he was developing into that sort of, just like I said, solid but not spectacular option. And Colin got him at a relative discount, 45th overall, and he's been great. Brian Robinson, another guy. What a steal. What a draft day steal. Got him 69th overall. And he has scored in double digits every game he has played. Now, he has early career Ken Walker syndrome, where he only has 8 receptions through 6 games played. And that's what's holding him back from being elite. But at least right now he's got that touchdown output. So Colin's got one of the best running back groups in the league. And it's not like he invested super heavily in it. The sad thing for him is that some of his higher draft picks have been disappointing. Olave, wide receiver 57, that was a second-round pick. Pittman, wide receiver 32, that was a third-round pick. And the shame with Pittman is that he is basically unusable when Anthony Richardson plays. He's kind of a touchdown or bust guy. When Flacco plays, he's a wide receiver too. When Richardson plays, he's a boom or bust flex. It's too bad. Malik Neighbors came back, wasn't great. No one on the Giants was great on this day. You know, you still think the talent of Neighbors and the target share will win out and he'll be fine. But I think this is, like, you got to realize that this is a possibility when you're stuck in a shit offense. And you look at Neighbors now, single digits in 2 of his 5 games played. That's the only knock I can possibly make on him, is he's stuck in a terrible situation. So there are going to be some of these lower end games, but at least even when it goes really poorly, he doesn't give you like 2. He's given 9.1, 6.1. That's palatable. Jackson Smith and Jigba, it's not taking that leap forward that was expected of him. Only 1 game above 11.1 points. Wide receiver 35. It's just, it hasn't really materialized. He's another one. He's kind of like a boomer bust flex. If DK Metcalf sits this week, maybe you get a chance for him to have a big game. Outside of that, Colin got great production from the defense and kicker spots, almost 30 combined. And Jordan Love was pretty solid. Jordan Love, I mean, he's just been a gunslinger, right? He's got 15 touchdown passes in 5 games played. Also 8 interceptions in 5 games played. He's having like a Jameis Winston Buccaneers era type season for Green Bay, but you got to love the volume of passing in that offense, and Love is averaging almost 24 per game right now. Colin's team is strong, and You feel like if any of those receivers, whether it be Pittman, Olave, Smith, and Jigba, if any of those guys can become a reliable wide receiver too, this team is scary. Maybe Olave has a chance to do that with Shaheed out for the season. Time will tell on that. Colin moves to 9-5, and yeah, I think he's got a legitimate shot at winning the league. I really do. The pieces are there. It needs to all mesh. Nothdurft fell in this one, but what a huge second matchup victory he got. And it was on the back of weekly MVP Lamar Jackson, 37.25. Already talked about him. Quarterback one, number one overall, 28 points per game. And what can you say? 20 plus in all but one game, 25 plus in all but two games. And the crazy thing recently is doing it through the air. In the last 3 weeks, he has had 348 and 4 passing touchdowns, 323 and 1, 281 and 5. That all those stats through the air. It's not like he's just running all around the field on people. He's doing this damage as a passer. And he's got a 15-2 touchdown to interception ratio. Now, he has done it against weak defenses, weak secondaries for sure. Cincinnati, Washington, Tampa. Let's see what happens as he starts to face some stiffer competition as the season goes on. I mean, really, you look at it, he doesn't have that tough of a schedule, but there are some more difficult defenses on tap. Pittsburgh a couple of times, Denver, the Chargers have been a good defensive team, Houston. So there are some challenges, and we'll see what happens with him in those games. But he's been great. Another guy who's been great, Kyren Williams, who scores every week. He just finds a way to score every single week. It's remarkable. His touchdown odds last week were some of the craziest I've ever seen, minus 220. So if you put a $220 bet on Kyren to score a touchdown, you'd only get 100 back. He was considered that much of a lock to score by the odds makers. He's got 9 touchdowns through 6 games. He is still averaging just 3.8 per carry. And he also only has 14 receptions. So the pass catching hasn't really been there. Which is weird with Kupp and Nakua out. I don't quite understand that. Like, I would have thought that he would have soaked up some of that target share, but it just hasn't been the case. So only 14 receptions, inefficient on the ground, but it doesn't matter because the man is just a touchdown machine. And as long as he keeps getting his volume, as long as he keeps finding the end zone, he's one of the best guys to have. Cade Otton, what a start. I mean, really, what a pull by Nothdurft here. You go with Otton as a tight end streamer, and he ends up going 8 for 100 on 10 targets. And now, what an incredible stroke of luck, too, because you end up picking him up on the week where Evans and Godwin go down. And now Otton has a legitimate chance at rest of season value here. He would have been a guy that people were targeting with FAB this week. Nothdurft was able to get him for nothing a week ago. And yeah, I mean, I'm not thinking he's going to be incredible, but in this tight end landscape, this could certainly be a solid tight end one now. And that would be a big deal for Nothdurft's team. And really, him and Lamar combined, it was one of the first times, if not the first time, I send out those second matchup projections every Sunday night or Monday. Been doing that since we put that into place last season. I think it's one of the first times that someone in the likely category, likely to win, likely to lose, ended up in the opposite. Ended up not being there. Nothdurft was in the likely to lose category. He was projected to come away with like 85 points for the week going into Monday night. And he outshot that projection by 23 to steal a second matchup win and keep himself in sole possession of first place. Had this not happened, Nothdurft, Peter, and I would be all tied at 10-4. So this was a huge deal that Nothdurft got that second matchup win. And as you can probably tell, based on what I just said, I was the one who was hurt by it because I ended up 7th in scoring. Now, the rest of Nothdurft's team was very unremarkable. Alvin Kamara, not a great game. In fact, a horrid game. I forgot about it because it was so long ago. Last Thursday night, 13 touches for 24 yards. He had 6 catches for 14. Over the last 2 weeks, 11 receptions for 38 yards for Kamara. He was bullshit. He's always kind of been bullshit in PPR formats. One of the big reasons that I pushed to change to half, and these last 2 weeks are examples of it. It's awesome that he ended up with just 5.4, whereas in a full PPR, he ends up with 8.4, which is a much more respectable total. I know it's only 3 points, but it's a fairly big deal. Like you look at 8.4 and you think, it's disappointing, but it's not the worst thing. You look at 5.4 and you say, that's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. And that's what you deserve to have when you had 24 total yards. You don't deserve to have a decent week. You deserve to have a bad week. And that's what happened with Kamara. And Andrew talked about this when he was on last week. Kamara's starting to slow down. 3.3 yards per carry or less 4 of the last 5 weeks, as that offense has started to struggle. More pressure has been put on him. I don't watch the Saints. I would imagine teams are stacking the box. Why wouldn't they? And that's probably why that rushing efficiency is coming down. And of course, as the offense is struggling, the touchdowns are drying up as well. He has just 2 over the last 5 weeks. Now, Kamara, he gets so much volume that he's going to be fine. But that incredible start he got off to, that probably is done, I think. Obviously, Kamara is as capable as anyone to have huge games here and there, but like consistent, just dominance like he was showing over the first month, I think that's gone. Garrett Wilson, he was okay. 5 for 61 on 9 targets. You like to see that he had 9 targets in Adams' first game. As long as he could stay right around there, he has a chance to survive this Adams trade. My worry, and it could still come to fruition, was that he'd be more around like the 6 targets area. But if he ends up around 9, 10, he should be fine. He had that egregious play on Sunday night. It wasn't entirely his fault. The ball might have gotten deflected a bit, and his view was blocked a little bit by the defender, but he had a ball just hit right off his chest, bounce up in the air, get intercepted. And that was kind of like the point where the Jets were just completely done. From there, they just got boat raced by Pittsburgh. Jets have just been a bad team. Wilson threw all of it, the wide receiver 11 on the season, but more often than not disappointing, 11.8 or less in 5 of his 7 games. Deontay Johnson, horrible showing. Everyone on Carolina was bad. I think Andy Dalton's done. I can't see that going on much longer. What's the point? He's not playing that great at this point. You're losing. What are you gaining from this? Like, I think nothing of Bryce Young, but just see what you have. Give him one last go. I can't see them sticking with Dalton much longer. The thing you're hoping for if you're Nothdurft is a trade of Deontay Johnson before the deadline. You hope he gets dealt, and he might. He certainly might. It would make sense. David Montgomery finally didn't score and as a result didn't produce. That's the way Montgomery is. Awesome player, but very touchdown dependent, and he didn't get in. Pass catching has been a little better for him this year. 13 receptions. It's not good, but it's an improvement. If he could catch 2 to 3 a game instead of 1 or 2, you'll take that. You'll take that. So yeah, just a down week for some of these guys, but Nothdurft it didn't matter, mainly because of Lamar Jackson. Seems like Jamison Williams might get suspended. PED usage. Doing his best Will Fuller impersonation. TJ Hawkinson might be back this week. And then Nothdurft did pick up Drake May. That was a guy Andrew and I talked about last week being a very interesting, potential piece. And Drake May now 20 plus points in his first 2 NFL starts. Promising stuff. Yeah, Nothdurft, like, I'm so torn on this team because it's obviously really good. But you look at that wide receiver group, and man, is it uninspiring. Wilson, uninspiring. Johnson, uninspiring. Whatever the hell is going on with Jamison Williams. Josh Downs is just ruined by Anthony Richardson. It feels like he needs a little more out of this group. And we'll see. It's possible because you have that chance of a Johnson trade. You have the chance of maybe Wilson won't be such a loser out of the Adams trade. We'll see. It's time will tell, and Nothdurft will be crossing his fingers, I'm sure. Chugging along now, Larar continues his strong recent run of play, 115.24, defeating Krieger, 108.61. This was a big matchup, too, between two teams that are in the middle of the pack. Two teams that are currently on the right side of the playoff picture, but down the road, the winner of this one could end up looming large in the final standings. Matchup MVP is a guy who has just been an absolute tank in Joe Mixon. 25.4. Joe Mixon, in his 3 full games played this season, has scored 25 plus in all of them. He has 5 total touchdowns in those games. And they decided Stroud is struggling. We're just going to ride Joe. And it was a great strategy to the tune of 25 for 115 and 2. He's just looked way better than I thought he would, averaging over 5 per carry. He now gets to face a Colts team that he gashed for 159 yards on the ground in week 1. Mixon, if he can stay healthy, looking like a running back 1 this season. T. Higgins, very promising. 3 straight weeks in double digits. 3 straight weeks of actually, you look at it at this point, since week 4, he's averaging about 10 targets per game. As defenses really key in on Jamar Chase, it's opening things up for Higgins. And he is producing. He's healthy right now. He's producing. Burrow is playing well. Higgins looks like a strong wide receiver, too, for the first time in a while. That's massive for Larar. Najee Harris playing the best football of his career right now. Thought he looked awesome on Sunday night. 21 for 102, got into the end zone late, and that long touchdown run at the end of the night. I forget exactly how long it was. I believe that had to be the difference in this matchup. Let's see. It's amazing how long it takes things to load on this computer when I'm running Zoom. It just cannot handle what I'm asking of it. Okay, it was only a 10-yard run. I don't know why I thought it was longer. Um, but that did still end up being the difference. That was a 7-point play. Larar won by a little under 7 points. So it's a big, big play for both of these teams' seasons. And Harris has been fantastic. So I've been very critical of him in the past. Right now, you have to give him credit for what he's doing. Cameron Dicker, by the way, too. Larar, what a job to pick him up. Picks him up Sunday morning, 21 points out of Dicker. Made a 59-yard field goal. He's just quality. He's one of the better kickers in the NFL. Truly, 4 of 5 from 50 plus this season now. Obviously, there's luck involved in Larar picking him up, but it was a big time move. It pretty much won him both his primary and secondary matchups. Let's say if he had picked up a kicker who scored even 8 or 9 points, he ends up going 0-2 this week. So just some real, uh, some crazy Monday night starts that loomed large for people. Dicker for Larar, Otten, we already talked about with Nothdurft. And later on, we'll talk about Rashad Bateman with Mecca. All of these starts on Monday night were so, so big. Swinging team seasons by 4 games. Teams that could have gone 0-2 going 2-0, or teams that could have gone 0-2 going 1-1. Big, big swings. Travis Kelce down game. I'm going to take out my AirPod now. That's why I paused there. I was thinking, you know what? We're probably getting close to the AirPod dying. How about I change it out before it dies? Look at me. Look at me planning ahead. It still ends up being a disturbance in this, so what did I even prevent? But I get to feel good about myself a little bit, just a little bit. Travis Kelce had a down game. Mahomes really did nothing through the air. Diggs did nothing, of course. We already know that Stroud threw for under 100 yards, so there's not much Diggs could have done with that. And J.K. Dobbins just kind of plodded his way to 8.1 points. I mean, he really, I saw some people really kind of like going crazy about him after week 6. He put up 25 for 96 and 1. I'm seeing people talk about he's a running back 1 rest of season. I don't believe in that at all. At all. I don't like that offense. I don't like the way he's playing. He is a huge injury risk. I don't see it. There's volume there, and that's a good thing. But to say that he's a running back 1, he's got under 50 yards rushing 3 of his last 4 games, under 3 yards per carry in 3 of his last 4 games. Incredibly inefficient. I think he's never been a big pass catcher. On the season right now, he's got 15 receptions, which isn't horrible, but it's nothing special. I think he's a touchdown dependent guy. I think he's fine, but I'm definitely not all in like some people are. Good story. I mean, it's awesome that he's even playing, let alone being a usable fantasy asset. I don't get me wrong, it's awesome for him that he's able to be that after all he's gone through injury wise, but I think people got a little carried away when he just kind of volumed his way to a quality week 6. Aaron Rodgers was bad. That's the one thing on this team. Like you look at Larar's team, it's been pretty awesome, but he's got a black hole at quarterback. He's got to figure that out. But really, if Larar can figure out quarterback, and if he gets healthy McCaffrey back, this team, man, this team's dangerous. And we got to give Larar credit for some of the picks he made. Mixon, Higgins, buying in on some guys whose stock was down, and it has worked out. Krieger ends up losing, and it was just you look at his team's strange week, right? Massive defense and kicker production, almost 36 points from those two spots. A ton of people had huge production from those two spots this week. 36 points from those spots. And the rest of the team just was pretty meh. Couple of guys horrible, and everyone else just kind of decent. Joe Burrow, nothing special out of him. 16.75. A day where they didn't throw it a ton. 25 passing attempts. And it just didn't come together. And Ramondre Stevenson was terrible. Just terrible. 3.5 out of him. I don't know. I don't really know what to say about his season. It has been just one of the most ridiculous I've ever seen through 6 weeks. He's got 3 weeks of 16 plus, and he's got 3 weeks under 7. So basically, you're either getting an amazing game or nothing. He's like a boomer bust wide receiver, but it's at the running back position, which is so uncommon. I don't know what you do with him. Jordan Mason down game 7.9. And you look at it, Jordan Mason now quietly 4 of his last 5 games in single digits. And I saw a real damning stat on Mason. He's got 7 carries inside the 5 this year. On those 7 carries, Jordan Mason has -1 yard, 1 touchdown. He's the only player with 7 or more carries inside the 5 that has less than 3 touchdowns, and he has just 1. And that's been what's holding him back, right? The 3 games where Mason was great for fantasy, he had a touchdown in all of them. The 4 games where Mason has been disappointing for fantasy, no touchdowns. Doesn't catch the ball, 10 receptions through 7 games. If he doesn't score, you're not going to be happy. Been saying it for weeks about different guys, including him. Week 6 was unfortunate because he was going to have a good game that night. Injuries got to him. But even so, you'd still be looking at 3 of the last 5 being disappointing. And now he very well might be heading into his last start here in week 8. Sounds like McCaffrey will be back in week 10. Of course, high re-injury risk with McCaffrey. So it's, there's a chance Mason regains value down the stretch. But as of now, you might just have one more game out of Mason, and then who really knows what the hell he's even going to be at that point. Deebo Samuel, shitty situation there. Tried to give it a go and just couldn't. He ends up being hospitalized with pneumonia. It's pretty crazy that he even tried to play. It seems like he only was in there. I didn't see exactly how long he played. I guess it must have just been a couple of snaps. So that's just one of those real tough situations if you're Krieger. He would have loved to be able to throw someone else into the lineup. Like he could have put George Pickens in, and he would have won the matchup if he if he was able to do that. So that's tough. That hurts. Terry McLaurin had a down game. No, he didn't. No, I'm looking at somebody else. McLaurin had a fine game. 12.8. McLaurin had a fine game, and it's now 5 in a row, double digits for him. And he was able to do this without Jaden Daniels. He did this with Marcus Mariota. So McLaurin's had a nice run. He looks like a solid wide receiver too right now, and that's big for Krieger's team. Do want to say with Debo, of course, with Ayuk being out for the season, that should aid him in the long run once he gets himself back to full health. Josh Jacobs had the first receiving touchdown of his career. Pretty crazy. And he's getting going a little bit more because the touchdowns are coming. He has 2 in the last 3 games. Volume is there. He needed the touchdowns to come, and they are. And so Jacobs is starting to round into form as like a low-end 1, high-end 2. Brock Bowers is awesome. You know, I think of that trade Krieger and I made, and man, does it look like a win-win. That trade that we made almost a month ago. He gets Bowers, Burrow, Mason, Samuel, Sutton. I get Worthy, Brian Thomas, and Bijan Robinson. And I mean, it saved Krieger's season. It's been great for me because I got Robinson out of it and shored up my running back position. And, you know, Brian Thomas has been elite as well. It's been a really good trade for both sides. Brock Bowers, it's funny, if you had told me back when we made the trade that Davante Adams would never play for the fucking Raiders again, of course I wouldn't have traded him. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, the news of Davante Adams' whole hamstring injury came out like the day after we made the trade. And then, of course, the rest is history. And Bowers has had double-digit targets each of the last 3 weeks. I think there's a fair shot that Bowers ends up the tight end 1 on the season. And it hurt for me to trade him. And yeah, I mean, it's a little bit unfortunate, but still a trade that I'm very happy with. And I know Krieger absolutely should be very happy with it too. Krieger had massive performances on the bench. Rachaad White, 26.1, talked about him, right? He might need to become more involved. 6 catches, 71 yards, 2 receiving touchdowns in this game. He might be able to just do what he's done in the past as a pass catcher and be quality for fantasy purposes. Javonte Williams had a rare, huge game. Something's really, really wrong with the Saints rushing defense, which is crazy because it was long great. Everyone's running over them right now. And George Pickens, first game with Russell Wilson, he went 5 for 111 and 1 on 9 targets. Some long completions between those two. You love to see that if you're Krieger. I mean, he suddenly has, you know, quite a few options at running back and receiver, and he's got quality quarterback, tight end. So this is a good team. 7-7, currently holding on to the last playoff spot, and it's been good for him despite the fact that he did barely lose in this matchup. Now we have a couple other matchups incredibly tight, and we'll move to the one involving my team. I defeat Lohan 104.06 to 102.19. Matchup MVP, Andrew, go fuck yourself. Bijan Robinson, for the second week in a row, delivers 21.8 points, over 100 yards rushing, a touchdown, 3 catches for 40. Robinson up to the running back, 6 on the season. So many people so worried about him. He's fine. And you know what the big thing here was? His usage, both in touches, 24 touches, snap share, all of it was way up. And it was something I mentioned too. Like, he was banged up. When he was struggling there, he was banged up. He was on the injury report. He had a hamstring issue, he had a shoulder issue. They had a game where they had a week they played on a short week. They played Tampa on a Thursday night, and everyone was freaking out about, like, oh my God, Tyler Algier gets so much. It's because Robinson was banged up. And Algier he's good. He should play. But the reason that it was like a 50-50 split there for a couple of weeks was because fucking Robinson was banged up. He's fine now. He's been great. Um, and yeah, I mean, it just all I got from Andrew for a couple of weeks there was just so much victory lapping, so many fucking messages. Real quiet right now. Brian Thomas had a great game, 19.6 out of him. He's up to the wide receiver 6 on the year. And it's amazing that he's done this in a dysfunctional offense. He's yet to have over 9 targets in a single game. He's just that explosive. He's averaging 17.1 per catch. He is a threat to take it to the house anytime the ball is in his hands. And yeah, there are going to be some down games because Jacksonville is not the best, team. But man, as like a wide receiver 3, when hopefully Collins comes back, I don't know that you could do much better in that flex spot with just an upside guy than Brian Thomas. And then we got to talk about James Conner, who saved me in the waning minutes of Monday night's game on a dump off from Murray, breaks 2 tackles to gain about 35 yards and win me the primary matchup against Lorran. I was dead to rights, and Conner delivered in the clutch like he has done before in this league. One time coming through for Andrew on a Monday night to send him to the playoffs. Conner, just a tank, and that was a big play. I would have loved for it to lead me to a 2-0 week, but we'll settle for the 1-1 off of that play. Jamar Chase, 15.1. He scored here. Chase continues to not see many targets, right? He's only gone above 7 in one game. I mentioned it when I talked about Higgins. Teams are doubling him like crazy. Somehow he's still the wide receiver 1 on the season, even with those low targets. It's similar to Brian Thomas, right? He's just one of those home run hitters where he can go for 60 yards and a score at any time and just kind of make his day. And he's so good in the red zone as well. So those 4 guys, that's the core right now. There was some disappointment elsewhere. Jaden Daniels, what a shame, going out on the opening possession after he had fucking 50 yards rushing. He was going to torch this team. And he goes out on the opening possession. Surely I would have gone 2-0 this week had he played even a half of football. I needed fucking 5 more points, and I would have gone 2-0. And it's funny, I get a text message from Lorran today that I got lucky because he benched Aaron Jones at the last second. Oh yeah, I'm real lucky. I'm real lucky that I'm without my 2nd and 3rd round picks and that my quarterback went out after 1 possession. Man, I can't believe how lucky I am to have come away with this. Give me a break. So yes, we lose Daniels after 1 possession. Fortunately, still find a way to go to 1-1. Chuba Hubbard scored in garbage time. That ended up being massive. The difference in the matchup, one of the plays that was the difference. Trey McBride continues to be the same thing every week. Just really high floor, low ceiling. He doesn't have a receiving touchdown this year. It's really weird, right? Like, he's got 45 targets in 6 games played. He's the tight end 5 despite missing a game. But it feels disappointing because he hasn't had a touchdown yet. You hope they come. You feel like they should come, but right now, not the case. And then I got no production out of defense and kicker. I made a bad start with the Giants. Frankly, I thought that they'd be able to come away with some turnovers, and that just didn't happen. They had the sacks, which I felt good about that. They had 5, but they had no turnovers, and they just kind of got run all over by Philadelphia. I'll tell you what, I haven't done the math on it. I cannot even fathom how bad my defense scoring has been this year. I've done a pretty poor job. It wouldn't shock me if I'm around 10 points total through 7 weeks. It's been that bad. So yeah, we come away with a really kind of annoying 1-1 week, but thank God it was 1-1 and not 0-2, because if it was 0-2, I would be insufferable right now, given the circumstances of the Daniels injury. Lorran loses here, and with this 0-2 week, I think it's fair to say Lorran is done. Assuming you need to go at least 14-14, that means he needs to end 11-3. And you think about, that's what Nothdurft has done. Like, Nothdurft's incredibly dominant, insane team. He's 11-3. So you're going to need to really kind of dominate from here on out and get some luck in that you can't really run into opponents going off against you. And that's why I think it's pretty much over for Lorran, which is crazy because, as discussed a few times, this is a very good team. Very good team. Best performance came out of Kareem Hunt, and I cannot lie, I was disgusted as Kareem Hunt scored 2 short touchdowns against San Francisco on a day where he averaged 3.5 per carry. He's a workhorse right now. Three games played, 63 carries. They are just riding him. Now, he's touchdown dependent because there's no pass catching, and he's not an efficient runner at this stage of his career. But he's probably got a pretty good chance at scoring most weeks. Certainly, there will be some down performances where he scores like 5. But for a guy that, Lorran was criticized by several, including myself, for his 30 FAB bid on, it's looking like a great move, averaging 16.3 per game. A.J. Brown, stud. Not sure there's a receiver I'd rather have over him. 24 targets in 3 games played, touchdown in all of them, 89 plus yards in all of them. Just a stud. Drake London keeps on going. He's up to the wide receiver 3, Drake London. Double digits in 5 of his last 6, and he has a touchdown in all of those games. He's been really good. He's got a good connection with Cousins. So you got 2 great receivers there if you're Lorran. I mean, those feel like 2 top 8 guys. Jaden Reed, I still really like. He had a poor game in this one. He's still the wide receiver 5 on the season. I think that's another top 10 to 15 guy. And yet, this team is in shambles, and it just doesn't feel right. Lorran is sixth in points for the season. He should not be in the spot that he is, but it's the way it breaks sometimes. Tony Pollard was down in this one. What can you say? I mean, he's been good this year. Quality running back too. He just had a bit of a down game against tough Buffalo team that blew Tennessee out. And Lohan, of course, has that regret, of he did make that decision at the last moment to put Reed in for Jones. It cost him 17 points. It cost him 2 wins. He'd be 5-9 if he had kept Jones in. I don't think you could beat yourself up too much. I think this is just kind of a product of what Lohan's team is. He has a bunch of like similar guys, right? Yeah, you got the studs in Brown and London right now, but then every week you were kind of deciding three guys for 5 spots between Pollard, Hunt, Reed, Ayuk, and Aaron Jones. Ayuk, of course, is now done. But every week you were kind of having to decide, make these tough decisions. You're splitting hairs. It's not like Lohan put in a bum. He put in Jaden Reed. He put in the wide receiver 5, who was coming off of 3 straight double-digit weeks, who has, when Love has played, looked amazing this season, and it just didn't work out. And that's just the way it breaks. It just is brutal that it came at such a crucial time. And yeah, I mean, this is a very good team that is going to have to be pretty much perfect from here on out to have a shot at the playoffs. But this is the second straight year that Lohan and I have had a matchup come down to the final minutes of Monday Night Football. Last year, Justin Herbert kneeled down. The Chargers had the ball at the 1 last year. And because of that, Herbert kneeled down for like a half-yard loss, which was counted as a 1-yard loss, instead of a more standard 2-yard loss. And that was the difference in both our primary matchup and the second matchup, because we finished 6th and 7th in scoring on the week. This is the second straight week that Lohan and I have played in just the most absurdly tight matchups possible, coming down to the final plays of Monday Night Football. We've got 2 more matchups to go. Here's another one that came down to the very end. Sam defeating Horvath 91.93 to 90.08. Both of these teams are now 4-10 on the season. And yeah, I mean, this one, what a fucked up way for this game and for this matchup to end. Chris Godwin catches a pass in the final minute, a 21-yard reception in the final minute of the football game. And it wins Sam the matchup. But on the play, Godwin snaps his ankle and is now done for the year. Just horrendous. Horrendous for Godwin, who is one of the more likable players in the league to me. Just a guy who always kind of gets the job done, super reliable. And he's now suffered significant injuries too in the last couple of years. He tore his ACL in either 21 or 22. I think it was 21. And now this. And you hate it for the player, for the person. And you hate that it happened when it did. Final minute of a 10-point game. It is what it is. We could talk all day about should he have been on the field. Ultimately, he was, and a really awful thing happened. And earlier in the night, Mike Evans was lost for what's being reported to be about a month. He's expected to miss the next 3 games before their week 11 bye and then return in week 12. He re-aggravated a hamstring injury that he had been dealing with. I mean, you just couldn't have a worse night if you're the Buccaneers, and you pretty much couldn't have a worse night if you're Sam. Yeah, he comes away with that win there at the end, but Sam's season now is effectively over. It was going to be tough as is without those two Buccaneers. Really, no chance, I would say, at making the postseason, and Sam knows that. Um, the kind of cruel part of this is that two is expected to come back this week. So you were thinking like Sam had waited so long to kind of get his team at full strength. It was going to be 6 weeks essentially waiting for that. And it was finally going to happen. And now this. And now it will never be at full strength. You look at this, and essentially Sam got a week and a half out of his team as designed. So, yeah, I mean, it's just a shitty year for him. He made some bad picks, and then he got just screwed by injuries. So, the Dolphins guys were bad. Tyreek Hill, almost unthinkable. 2 targets. 2. I mean, come on. Like Mike McDaniel, you're supposed to be this guru, this genius. You gotta be able to scheme the ball into Tyreek Hill's hands a few times, man. Like you can't go through a game and Tyreek Hill touches the ball 2 times. I watched most of that game, of course, because it was against the Colts. One of the worst games I've ever had the displeasure of sitting through. Just disgusting on both sides. But just dumbfounding, right? Like, how do you not? You can't throw a screen pass to them. You can't try. They had one end around, but like you don't do that a couple of times. A fucking just shallow cross, like easy kind of layup completion. You can't really. You can't do that a few times for one of the most electric players in the NFL. That's fucking nonsense. I don't care who their quarterback is. Anybody could scheme up 5 touches for a player in a game. To me, that's inexcusable from McDaniel. And you look at Hill here; he hasn't single digit scoring week 2 onward. He's the wide receiver 43. You couldn't, in your wildest, nightmares, have fathomed how poorly this would go for a guy who just a season ago had one of the great years of all time as a wide receiver. There's a decent chance it gets going now, but it's not going to matter for most Tyreek Hill owners. It certainly is not going to matter for Sam unless, again, he's in that similar position to Lorran where you got to finish 10-4, 11-3. It's not impossible, but goddamn, is it difficult. Devin Singletary, terrible game. We've talked about the Giants enough. They just didn't have it. And he only had 5 carries. Sam Laporta, I don't know. I don't know what the deal is there. 17 targets through 6 games for Sam Laporta. Really strange stuff. Maybe the Jameson Williams potential suspension helps him. I don't know. But There have been games where Laporte has done nothing, where Williams has done nothing. Just feels like he's not really a part of their passing offense this year. So yeah, all in all, real bad stuff. And Sam, like others, great production, defense and kicker. Almost 35 points out of those spots. Kyler Murray had that long rushing touchdown. He ends up with a pretty good game. But it was still a tough week. Uh, yeah, I can't believe both of those. I can't believe both of those Buccaneers guys went out in the same night. That is so fucked. It's just so fucked. But what can you do? Horvath on the other side. This this is way more crushing for him than it is for Sam. Like he needed that 1-in-1 week. That would have been huge for him. And to lose it at the very end is brutal because Horvath is now 4-10, and I'm willing to throw him in that same category of he's done. His season's over. Um, and you had such a big game out of Jahmyr Gibbs, 30 points out of him. He looked as good as ever, almost 8 yards per carry. He, by the way, is averaging 5.7 per carry on the season. Njoku, who might just be an animal rest of season now. 10 catches and a touchdown on 14 targets with Cooper gone. And then just nothing else. Nobody else got into double digits in this one. Nobody. Trey Sermon sucks. He did have a couple of nice runs, but he's been quite awful. He's averaging 2.8 per carry this year. At a point, he had like 2 or 3 nice runs in a row. And by nice runs, I mean like 5 yard gains. Because comparatively for him, I mean, that's a huge deal to gain 5 yards when you're usually losing two. And he was signaling over to the sideline like, feed me, feed me. Gonna fucking feed you? Give me a break. Uh, Zay Flowers did nothing because somehow Rashad Bateman was a thing this week. 1 target for Zay Flowers. What did he get injured? Okay, so he got banged up, but he stayed in the game. But all right, so at least there was that aspect of it. Maybe he was just in as a decoy from that point onward. So there's some explanation for that, but still just 1 target. And he got banged up in the second quarter. It's not like he got, hurt on the first possession of the game. Darnell Mooney, a couple of bad games in a row for him. Still not the worst guy to start, especially, if Horvath keeps going with Kirk Cousins, you have that stack there where you can at least, hope for a touchdown to Mooney. That ends up being a big play for him. Eckler, you needed him this week, and he fucking didn't come through. 3 points. Weird that he ended up only with 6 touches, especially on a day where Jaden Daniels goes out. You would think that would lead to some more usage for Eckler, but that game got out of hand so early that they probably just decided, hey, let's give the vet kind of a day off, and they rode Brian Robinson and one of Dylan's favorite players in the NFL, Jeremy McNichols. Kirk Cousins was bad. Mahomes on the bench was bad, but ironically enough, Mahomes had Horvath started him. The 13.6 that Mahomes got would have been enough to defeat Sam. It's still, uh, not exactly something to celebrate. And yeah, I mean, Zamir White just seems like I mean, he shouldn't be on a team. Like, he should not be on anybody's roster. He ended up with 4 touches in this game. He's done. I forgot to mention on my team, Alexander Madison is somehow a thing. I've been like joking about it. I guess he's going to be relevant. I can't believe it. I think he's awful. But if he's going to get 20 touches a week, if Zamir White's just completely done, then I guess Alexander Madison is a thing. That's the world we live in. But yeah, Zamir White, god damn, what a colossal bust. I saw a scatter plot today. He's been like leaps and bounds the worst running back in the NFL. Like horrifically bad. Some of the worst rushing efficiency of all time coming out of Zamir White this year. And then if you're Horvath, you look ahead to the future with all these big pieces that you just got in the trade, right? You have Jonathan Taylor. I think he plays this week. So far, I have been correct throughout all of it. I've said on here each week what I expected. I've said 3 straight weeks I thought he wouldn't play. He hasn't. I think he comes back this week. I think we see Taylor. So you need him to get going. And then you'd have Taylor and Gibbs. You got DeAndre Swift if you want to use him. DJ Moore. I don't know if it's a horrible, like Horvath, there are some weeks where playing both tight ends might make sense. He's got options now. The difficult thing is Horvath is going to be having to make some tough start-sit decisions each week. And we know that that's not the most enjoyable experience. But yeah, this team will be better moving forward, I think. But I think it's too little too late now, being 4-10. One last matchup to get to. Mecca with a huge 2-0 week defeats Andrew 109.31 to 71.03. And our matchup MVP, I don't know if I named one in the Sam matchup. I feel like I didn't. It goes to Broncos defense in Sam's matchup, 21.38. That was the third highest scoring player. It's not a player, but the third highest scoring slot in that entire matchup. Matchup MVP here for Mecca goes to Rashad Bateman, 20.1. Rashad Bateman, best ad of the week. Rashad Bateman over Michael Wilson, best start of the week. And this decision by Mecca won him 2 games. He would be 4-10. He would be screwed had he not gone with Rashad Bateman. Just crazy, crazy pull from Mecca. I don't know why he started him. This is a guy who has historically been a huge disappointment, who this year has been, before last night, he had been okay. He had scored 9.1 or more. He had scored between 9.1 and 13.8 in 3 out of 4 games coming in, but targets were down, even, counting last night. Only 1 game above 5 targets because he had just 4 in that, huge performance. I think Mecca just played a matchup, right? Tampa secondary, not good. He went with a play to try to exploit it, and man, did it pay off. 49-yard touchdown catch. He had a 59-yard reception as well. And it was one of the better games of Bateman's career, coming at just a huge time and picking up the slack for fellow Monday night wide receiver Marvin Harrison, who scored 3.6. And Harrison now falls to the wide receiver 28. And that's because he's got 4 weeks of 4.6 or less. It's been terrible. It has been real bad. And it's a shame because every time Harrison has one of these bad games, you can go online. I sound like I'm like 90 years old. You can go on social media, whatever your platform is, and find plays where Murray missed Harrison for like huge gains, fucking walk-in touchdowns. It happened again last night. And Kyler Murray's just not playing very well, and it's hurting Harrison. Your hope, if you're Mecca, is that Murray gets going and that translates into success for Harrison Jr. I think it's possible. I don't think it will continue to be this bad. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a great game. He's, he's been pretty good. Slight disappointment, just the slightest, but um, just so solid, so reliable. Few players have a higher floor than Amon-Ra St. Brown. George Kittle had another good game. What else is new? I mean, he has just been really, he's kind of been who San Francisco has run their offense through, which is amazing. Um, Obviously, he's always been good enough to be that guy, but he's never needed to be because they've had McCaffrey, they've had Samuel, even Ayuk at times has kind of been the guy that they've run through. But right now, it is Kittle, and that has not been the case in a long, long time since before McCaffrey got there for sure. Tight end one, and with Ayuk out for the season, I feel pretty good about him. Might not continue to be this good once McCaffrey gets back, but certainly a locked in top five tight end rest of year. Another team, great defense and kicker production, over 30 points between those two spots. And the big thing for Matt now is Cooper Kupp seems like he's going to be back this week. So you've got that three-headed monster at receiver. If Kupp is healthy, if Harrison gets going, and then you've got Kittle, you've got those four studs at those pass catching spots. The problem, as it has been all year, is with the top three spots on the starting lineup. Anthony Richardson sucked again. 10 of 24 passing. 10 of 24. I'm restraining myself from no one needs me going on a Colts fan related rant. But Richardson, the promising thing from fantasy perspective, 14 rushing attempts. You love that. You love that. And hey, that's what I've been saying, right? He cannot throw. So if we're not going to let him run, he shouldn't play because if he's not running, we know he can't throw, so he provides nothing. At least if you let him run, he's giving you that element. You got to let him run. And they were doing that on Sunday, and they were doing it inside the 10. A touchdown didn't come out of it, but you like that usage. Multiple times, designed runs, quarterback draws inside the 10. The opportunity, I think, is still there for Richardson to be a fantasy contributor, but it's going to have to be with his legs. We have learned at this point it will have to be through rushing yards and touchdowns. And so far, they haven't come, right? He's played 4 full games and he has just 1 rushing score. He doesn't have over 56 rushing yards in any game. And that, I think, is why it's been as bad as it's been. Well, I don't think that. That is why it's been as bad as it's been. Hopefully for him, for Mecca, for me, and for the Colts, hopefully it gets better. The 2 running back spots, I don't know if those are going to get better for Mecca. I really don't. I'm almost at a loss over the fact that somehow he still has not found even one reliable running back. Like Matt has done all he can. He has rotated through seemingly 50 different running backs, and none of them have worked out. Jerome Ford had a couple of games. Chase Brown has had a couple of games, and I still do think he has a chance to be a good running back too. But then you see a game like this out of him, and you're reminded of the fact that he has single digits in 4 out of 7 weeks this year. So this is a low end running back to high end 3, not a guy you love needing to count on. And then the other spot is just, it's been like a gaping black hole. Maybe Mostert can be a thing with, in theory, Miami's offense improving. He is getting some usage, 19 carries in week 5. Part of that was Achane going out with a concussion, but still 11 carries this on Sunday. If you can get 10 to 15 touches, you get some touchdowns out of him, because last year he had fucking 20 of them. This year he has none, due to the combination of the Dolphins struggling and him missing time. Maybe Mostert could be a decent answer, but I don't know. Matt was texting me a little bit this morning, and he said he can't believe he's in contention. And really, it is stunning because he's only scored in triple digits 2 out of 7 weeks. He has yet to top 115 in any week. He is last in points scored, I believe. Let me confirm that. It's not even worth it. I believe he is. I'm pretty sure he's last in points scored. So really, by all accounts, Matt should be more in that 4 and 10 range than someone like Lorran. But it's just the way it's worked out. He's gotten a couple of favorable points against matchups and come away with wins. And now this team, it has the chance to get going a little bit. This is someone who was allowed to keep their season afloat while they were really struggling. And maybe Matt really is, hitting on a handcuff running back away from having a good team. That's kind of how quick, and he would need to figure out quarterback, but it's not like he's so far away that there's no path to seeing this team becoming good. You've got 3 pretty good receivers. You got an elite tight end. Well, you have 2 elite receivers and a possible for a third one in Harrison. You have an elite tight end. If you can figure out quarterback and 1 running back spot, suddenly this team becomes good. It's not completely out of the realm of possibility. I'm not counting him out yet. I think he has an uphill climb, but I'm not counting this team out yet. Andrew, on the losing side, has been on a horrendous stretch. He knows it. Everybody knows it. And Andrew is not enjoying it at all. This is 3 out of the last 4 weeks scoring under 80 points. And really, when you look at the season as a whole at this point, 4 times Andrew has scored under 90. And, over 110 just twice. Really, he had 1 huge week in week 2, and outside of that, his team's been pretty bad. And he is second to last in points scored. And like Mecca, because he was allowed to win a couple of times when he didn't really produce, his team is 7-7. Andrew has a win when he scored 89 points. He has a win when he scored 108 points. And so he's 7-7. When he should probably be more in the 5-9 area. Josh Allen was really good. 24.25. Josh Allen, for the most part, has been very good this year. He had that weird stretch where, they blew out Miami in week 2. He didn't really need to do anything. He had an awful couple of games against Baltimore and Houston. But outside of that, 4 great games, and he's the quarterback 3. And he also still does not have an interception, which is incredible. And now you add Amari Cooper, and you feel pretty goddamn good about Josh Allen for the rest of the season. But what else do you feel good about on this team? CeeDee Lamb was on bye. You feel good about CeeDee Lamb. And you feel good about James Cook being like a low-end running back 1, high-end running back 2, like he has been. What else do you feel good about on this team? Running back 2 is a mess. Flex is a disaster. Devontae Smith, we kind of know what he is. He's a really good real-life player who isn't the best for fantasy because, they just have other guys that they use in the red zone. Like, you got Brown, you got Barkley, you got Hurts. And so if Devontae Smith doesn't come away with a long touchdown, which he does a few times a year, and he already has had a couple of those this season, but if he doesn't come away with one of those, you leave pretty empty-handed. And don't get me wrong, like, he's scored in double digits in 4 out of 5 games this year, but it's real low ceiling. Only 1 game above 14 points. I just don't know if it's a guy who is worth a 4th-round pick. He feels like the type of guy you'd want to be taking more in like the late 5th, early 6th as your wide receiver 3. So that's kind of a questionable spot. And then running back 2 and flex are just a mess. Tight end, suddenly, some hope. Tucker Kraft has been pretty good. Double digits 3 of the last 4. He's the tight end 3 on the year. Not super reliable, but a damn good guy to start. And Mark Andrews, who was left for dead, deservingly so, suddenly has sprung to life and is the tight end 9, which is just incredible because 3 weeks ago he was like the tight end 50. Now, I don't think Mark Andrews is like back because you look at the targets here, he still has yet to have over 5 targets in any game. The thing is that he has had touchdowns, 3 in the last 2 weeks. So that's kind of what he's become. He's become that classic tight end dependent or touchdown dependent tight end, excuse me, which many guys are this year. So I feel comfortable starting Andrews. It's just, I don't think, I think some people are like, wow, Mark Andrews is back to being like an elite tight end 1 like he always has been. I don't think so. Not until the usage increases. But at least he is showing signs of life. And Andrews' bench is pretty uninspiring. I don't know. As currently constructed, I don't think this team makes the playoffs. I just think there are too many teams better. But the big thing for Andrew is that he is 7-7. So if he can figure something out, it's similar to Mecca, right? Where this team hasn't been very good, but it's still in the playoff picture. And now all you kind of need is to hit on one guy. And that could happen any week, especially when you're rostering handcuff running backs. You pick up the right one at the right time, or you're able to. Same thing at receiver. Andrew is in need of a receiver. You pick up the right guy, like anything could happen for sure. It's not like his team is so bad that there's no chance. I think it's clearly behind the top. I believe at this point a top six has kind of established itself. For a while there was a huge just mess of fucking teams in the middle of the pack and no one was differentiating themselves. At this point, me, Nothdurft, Peter, and Colin have very much differentiated ourselves. Larar and Krieger are in their own tier as well. And then, that's six teams right there. Then you kind of have a group of Mecca, Dylan, Andrew, and you have a group of Horvath, Sam, Lorran. And the only reason Lorran is there is because of his record, not because of his team. But yeah, I mean, it's not going to be super easy for Andrew to pull off a playoff spot, I don't think. Which, a few weeks ago he was sitting in a hell of a spot, right? What did he start out 5-1, I think? I believe he started 5-1. And then even more recently 7-3. And then you go 0-4 and in a blink it's like, damn. You start noticing the warts on a team. The Calvin Ridley thing really hurts. To have just drafted a complete zero sucks. And none of the other guys he took late have panned out. You lose Rashid Shaheed. That was brutal because he was that flex. Frankly, I forgot about him at first because Andrew has had to drop him, unfortunately. That was the late round pick that he hit on to make up for Ridley. And then you lose that. And, when you don't have a very deep team, as he didn't, losing one guy like that is just devastating. McConkey has not gotten going yet. He could at some point, but he hasn't yet. And Zach Moss has just fallen to hell. So Andrew's got work to do. I know that he's looking to do that work. He's trying. He's trying to make shit happen, but so far not able to get anything going as far as trades are concerned. All right, let's take a look at FAB from a week ago. Had some interesting ones. Wasn't a huge week. Peter ends up getting Christian Watson. That was the highest bid of the week. 18 spent on him. It's not the first time that Peter has kind of way outbid on a guy. It was 13 more than anyone else. Mecca had gone for 5. And you know what? The last couple of guys Peter did it with, it's really worked out. Bucky Irving, he way overshot on him. Who cares? He's turned out to be a great pickup. Tank Bigsby overshot on him. Who cares? He's been a great pickup. So maybe the same will come to be with Christian Watson. But it was not a good first week for him on this team. Pop Douglas, Andrew reeled him in with 16. And then Dylan tried to get him for 10. That was really the only other notable bid this week. A couple of huge lower end moves, right? Like Mecca getting Rashad Bateman for $1 and Nothdurft getting Cade Otton for free. Klingman made a nice ad of Bengals defense. They scored 16.8 points. And then Dylan on Friday grabbed Trey Sermon for 5, who he then used in that trade of Jonathan Taylor. He packaged them together, which was, I mean, a smart move because you're giving somebody Taylor and then you're able to give them, a guy who's getting carries with Taylor out. Unfortunately, Sermon sucks and Tyler Goodson overtook him, but Dylan doesn't give a damn. He was able to get the trade done. And yeah, I mean, that kind of wraps it up for this previous week's FAB. Tonight, I'm not even going to get into because I want to pump this out before 5 a.m. Um, some interesting options. Some interesting options this week. I wouldn't be shocked if we see a big bid on one or two guys because I feel like we're getting to a point in the season where some people are getting a little bit more desperate and have the fab to spend. So it wouldn't shock me if that happened. People have been a little bit hesitant since, a few of the bigger fish haven't worked out, like Likely and Wicks, but I don't know. I kind of something in me thinks that we might see a big one or two overnight. What else do I got to do for this? Oh yeah, big power rankings. What do we got for this? What do we got for the old power rankings? Um, Nothdurft stays at one. You know, that's just indisputable. I am at two. I remain at two, but the gap is closing. The gap is certainly closing. Peter is now at three. And he's got a chance. If he beats me this week, Peter will be at two in 7 days. Colin is at four, just, real solid top four right there. All of those teams have been performing very well recently. Larar at five has been great. Larar was at five last week. He sticks there. And then Krieger moves up a spot from 7 to 6. I said before, I feel like that's the pretty clear top six right now. Dylan moves up a spot from 8 to 7. And then Lorran moves up a spot from 9 to 8. It's funny, right? Lorran lost. He fell to 3 and 11. I can't justify dropping Lorran below that. I just can't. His team has performed too well. It's too good on paper. And it's where it deserves to be. Andrew is at 9. And I know he's going to be a little salty about that, probably. I don't know what to tell you. It's where your team, frankly, you have no business being anywhere higher than that. The only reason you're 7 and 7 is because you've gotten lucky in points against. So Andrew is at 9. He drops 3 spots. Horvath stays at 10. Mecca jumps a spot from 12 to 11. And Sam falls from 11 to 12. Just quickly looking at records, if everyone played everyone each week, Nothdurft still dominating in that 67 and 10. 14 games ahead of me at 53 and 24. And then you have Peter and Colin. Peter 44 and 33, Colin 43 and 34, and Larar is fifth at 41 and 36. So for a while there were only 2 or 3 teams above 500, and this is why I'm saying like we're starting to get some separation. You now have 5 teams above 500 in that. And that's where we're at. That's where we're at through 7 weeks. We've got week 8 coming up, and the matchup of the week appears to be me against Peter. Now, we'll see who each of us have available. I don't think he's going to have Metcalf. I don't think I'm going to have Jaden Daniels. I think I have a better chance of having Daniels than he does of having Metcalf. But that could definitely, make this matchup a little less appealing than it otherwise would be. But that looks like a fun one. And then you've got some other, really important battles between teams in the middle of the standings. You've got Krieger against Dylan. Dylan, you feel like kind of needs this one. Big matchup for him. Krieger will be hoping that Deebo Samuel plays. And then you've got Andrew against Larar. Larar's team, which is on a roll, against Andrew's team, which is sinking like a rock. but Andrew can kind of undo all of those bad feelings with a win here. And then the rest of the matchups, Nothdurft takes on Mecca. Big spot there for Matt, of course. I mean, you give Nothdurft the edge, but if Matt could ever pull off an upset there, it would be a huge deal. Colin against a Horvath team that will be fighting for its life. And then Sam against Lorran. You know, that's a must win for Lorran. Absolute must. You need a 2-0 week. He's currently projected to have a 2-0 week. He needs it. And Sam at this point will be looking to play spoiler on Lorran's squad. Sam with the guys he has in right now is currently projected for 46.1 points. I believe he has Fields in his lineup. So yeah, that's what we've got in week 8, nearing the midpoint of, well, we have hit the midpoint of the regular season, which is crazy to think about. That's why I sent out the playoff picture with our second matchup scores, and we're nearing the midpoint of the full season. So it's going to do it for me on this Tuesday night, Tuesday, October 22nd. Halloween just 9 days away. Love that. It's a great time to channel your inner demon. We all have an inner demon. We all have a dark side. Embrace it. So yeah, good luck to everybody except for Dylan, and good night.